Woohoo. Okay. Hello. Theoretically, I'm online. Uh, not so much tech trouble today. Just lots of prep to do. I realized I have some. I feel like I actually have some stuff to talk about. Not that I don't always have stuff to talk about, but yeah, I figured I would prep a little bit more content wise. Um, Not for any particular reason, just because it's sort of a weird night tonight. So I think I had some time to prep and stuff like that. So it's should be fun at least. I um I haven't gotten a super long chance to warm up, but that's okay. Um, I think I've as I continue to work through my educational materials here, all of my books, all of my Beyond Bop drumming, and all of this stuff. I realize my warm up gets more efficient, seemingly week to week. Um, there's less like panic upon like starting the stream now of like, oh god, I haven't sat down at all. Like as long as I can basically dedicate 25 minutes, I can start at least sort of moderately warmed up to enough of a degree where I don't sound like total dog shit the second that I hit a drum. Of course, I'm probably gonna like immediately disprove that. Now that I've said that, I'm gonna start playing and I'm gonna like immediately drop a stick or something. It is funny in that way, you know. I'm just sitting here alone. In theory, there's no reason for me to be nervous. But it's funny, you hit the sort of start streaming button, and you are suddenly like, oh, I'm actually doing it. you know, it's kind of a funny thing. Like there's no audience in the room. There aren't even cats in here today. Literally, there's not a soul who can see this. But you still get not butterflies, but you're conscious that people could theoretically see it. Even though I think the people who have actually seen this so far are a grand total of like, I think on YouTube, between all of the VODs that I've posted and the stream, I think there's basically been around 30 randos who somehow found the VODs on YouTube and watched it for at least a little bit. And um, in terms of the stream, there's like, a couple of strangers that aren't just people that I blackmailed from my real life to watch these. So basically, most of them are like, a couple dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen randos on YouTube who I can't account for. I don't know why they've watched a portion of the VOD. I don't know really how they're finding it. But that's kind of funny. You're like, oh, there's like 2 dozen total strangers who are watching my playing. It's like, you know, it would almost be easier to just like busk around in a city or something like that. Because at least then it's like you really can perceptibly see that like people are passing by you and then continuing on with their day. So if you mess up, it's like a very tiny fraction of their experience of you or something like that. And then they move on with their life. As opposed to here where it's like you just have like I just have two camera eyes, glaring at me for 2-3 hours at a time. I'm like, it's oddly more threatening than people staring at you. Like I've played live music before, at least an okay amount of live music, and you get excited for live music. At least for me, like I get excited for it, but I wouldn't necessarily call it nerves. I'm just sort of like there's some adrenaline and I'm like ready to go, but for some reason the camera is more imposing. I don't quite know why. Um, so we have a couple things that I was interested in today. We're for the most part, I think we're just going to continue with trying to get a take of some song that I'm satisfied with. I mean, if you haven't noticed this, I've said I think for the past 2 weeks that I've done this show now that I want to get a take of something that I can chop up to put on Instagram. And if you've noticed, I haven't posted into Instagram in like weeks and weeks. And, you know, the reason for that is very simple, which is that I can't make myself start to post takes from a song that I'm not satisfied with. It's like, I don't want to have a kind of unhealthy perfectionism with this stuff, but a little bit of perfectionism has creeped in. It's like, I want the whole song to be great. You know, I don't want multiple takes of the song to be great. I want the whole product, even if I'm chopping it up for Instagram, to be from like one performance, you know? And that's like certainly a kind of obsessive quality. That certainly doesn't seem to bother any other drummers, right? Every other drummer is just like chopping things to pieces constantly. Like it's like, you know, it's like Joseph, you watch some of these videos on Instagram, or I mean, actually, it's really apparent on YouTube. It's like, oh God, it's like you're watching it's like you're watching a modern day Mengele or something like that. You're like, God, they're just like chopping this thing to pieces. You know, it's really gruesome in that way. The second that you start to learn anything about like video or audio editing, you just start to notice, you know, that pretty much everyone's faking, and it's just shocking once you develop like sort of a basic understanding of the kind of simplest and most straightforward sort of editorial tricks for putting things together and taking things apart and recombining things. You just notice it everywhere. Not that there's, to quote Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that. I get it. It's like, you know, the demands on you as a player are to sound perfect, so you might as well, or it's not even a case of you might as well, you might just not have a choice. So I get it, you know. I don't think it's a system that drummers really introduced into the world. I think it's basically a system that basically like labels introduced into the world. You know what I mean? Like you need perfect sounding records, right? In some ways, the most chaotic instrument is the drums. And so the drums are the ones that get sort of like crushed the most into the confines of like the perfect sound of a modern record or something. And so now everyone assumes that that's what a drum kit sounds like or whatever. I noticed this the other day. I was listening to, I guess it was Since I've Been Loving You by Led Zeppelin. And I noticed this before, but never totally consciously. It's only because I've been listening to a lot of like cleaned up sounding metal music and stuff recently. So I had always noticed it, but it never really consciously struck me. You can just hear this, you can hear the squeak of the chain on John Bonham's bass drum pedal throughout like that entire song. No. It's not Since I've Been Loving You. It's Dazed and Confused. Am I right about this? I'm pretty sure it's Dazed and Confused. We're going to find out. Dazed and Confused. You have to let me know if this is like insanely loud, by the way. I haven't tested the desktop audio in a while.
When you live with moderate to severe Crohn's disease or...
I'm not living with moderate to severe Crohn's disease, unfortunately. I think it is. I think it's Dazed and Confused.
Dazed and confused for so long.
No. I think I was right the first time. I think it's Since I've Been Loving You. I don't know if you're hearing it, but basically, the pattern there is like a swing pattern on the bass drum. There's no the final note of the swing pattern isn't in the. It's just played on the snare, so it's just ba 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 ba. But like basically at the initiation of every one of those hits, a little bit before it, you can hear this tremendous, like, I desperately need WD-40 squeaking of the bass of the bass drum pedal, and it's amazing. It's like it's this little detail. It's so incredible. I feel like it adds so much character to the track, and it's just in there. Like you can audibly hear like it's so funny, but it's also like something that would just never survive the process now, particularly because it's not clear that most people are actually miking up their bass drum anymore. It's not clear that there would be a microphone anywhere close enough to where the bass drum is that would actually pick up the sound of that squeaking. There's, it would just be triggered or whatever. Like there would just be, you wouldn't have that sound even captured by a microphone probably, but even on the off chance that you did, man, that would not survive sort of post-production at all. No chance, zero chance. So yeah. Anyway, how about let's do a little solo here or something fun, and then I'll come back to you with some goodies. Okay, cool. that last bit, I was playing something and then I suddenly realized, oh, there's a connection to a song I sort of remember. That song being, oh God, I can't remember the name of the track. It's the opener on Them, the King Diamond album. With that amazing intro by Mickey D. Woo! Down the wrong pipe. That amazing intro by Mickey D, which is a classic example of something that kind of sounds simple, and then you think about what you're hearing specifically, and you're like, oh, there's an easy way to play this and a complicated way to play this. And neither of those, like none of the easy ways that you could potentially arrange that are actually how it's played. There's a, it sounds like on first blush, it sounds like a basic metal thing. But there's just like, it's just, the sticking on it is very odd. It could be played just with like the Mike Portnoy style quad fills, but and that's like, when you initially listen to it, that's kind of what you assume it is. It's not. It's not. It's triplets first off, and then the way the triplets are arranged are slightly unconventional. It's basically the classic trash can ending, but with double bass added to round it out to be 6 notes. So it's this. Which is just like, I don't know. He's an interesting drummer because like everything sounds like very old school metal and powerful. But yeah, there's all of these little twists and turns in his playing that are very odd. You can hear sort of like on some of those old records, there's like ghost notes in like otherwise very like old school, slowed down heavy metal beats. But yeah, it's like underneath it, there'll be like very tasteful playing. Like it'll just be some like 6/8 stomp, but there will be tons of like ghost notes in it. In a way similar to like he's like a double bass using version of Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden or something like that, where the playing's very, again, like very metal, but then also there's like these weird old techniques informed by like bluesier, rock and roll music and stuff like that. Even still to this day, I'm like not totally sure what like Nico McBrain is playing at the beginning of Eagle Fly Free, I think it is. It's something where it's like it's a basic pattern that you hear all over the place, but there's something about the way he's arranging it between his hands and his feet that is very unconventional and very strange. And it just flies by too quickly. Like I've never slowed down the original track to try to piece together what exactly he's hitting when. But yeah, it's something that like a modern metal guy would fill out the sound of that fill at the start by like throwing double bass underneath it or whatever. But he doesn't use double bass, so it sounds so like it's such a like thick sound for an opener, but it doesn't use like the modern techniques or something. Like, I think a modern player would just play it with double bass and it would be something like this. Something like that. But he's not, because he's using one pedal, and then he's also going like blazing fast. Like, I think I can't remember like what the opening tempo of it is exactly, but I think it's like I think it's like this. And somehow it sounds like really not wimpy and really beefy, even though he's only using the one pedal. I can't even remember. Like, I don't remember what any of the patterns are. I just remember that every time that intro plays, it's one of those things where, like, you know, almost no one is paying attention to how cool that fill is, because the second that you hear that, it's just a signal that a really kick-ass old Iron Maiden song is about to play. You're not necessarily thinking of it in terms of like the structure of it as an intro to a song. But yeah, it's like, it's an interesting one if you actually sort of like sit there for 10 seconds and are like, wait, how exactly is he playing that? That's the great thing about so many old school metal players anyway, is just like they adapted techniques that I think drummers had gotten used to playing much slower and stuff like that, and they kicked it into overdrive, you know, because like similar type, you know, stickings to whatever is being played in Eagle Fly Free, I think they appear even in sort of like the famous, you know, John Bonham fill in Stairway to Heaven and stuff like that, right? Like much sort of calmer drums and stuff like that, that, you know, you often see older players playing. They're very relaxed because they played it, you know, 150 times. You know, I think Steve Gadd plays a similar figure every time he like solos. There's a phrase he really loves that has a similar stick feel where it's kind of like a trash can type decatukum. But yeah, of course he plays it like so much. He plays it like slowed down, and the great metal players were listening to all that and then brought, you know, like all this testosterone to it and sped it up and made it really loud. But yeah, like the evolution of that Eagle Fly Free intro, like I think it basically begins with like the John Bonham thing at Stairway to Heaven. And you see Steve Gadd playing that all the time as like solo phrases, you know, and you know he's got that grip on his sticks that's so loose that like they look like they're like flailing around in there. They look like they're about 800 pounds, and he can't quite control them because like they're so like jangly and loose in his hands. And he'll just sit there and like groove on that as a 3/4 pattern, you know, just for like measures at a time. He'll just sit on that. And then like a young Nico McBrain must have heard that and like, what if we made it metal? Or whatever he plays. Once again, I can't even like remember the rest of Eagle Fly Free because every time I hear that intro, it's like my guy brain turns on and I'm like, wait, I have to figure out the math on that. Like, I can't just like listen to it. I need to splice it open and figure out how it works and everything. Okay. Okay. Well, that was enough screwing around for a while. Okay. So, exciting development since the last time I did this was finally my my physical copy of the God Machine, the new Blind Guardian album, came in the mail, which means I finally was allowed by my own rules, by which I can't listen to it via streaming. I was allowed by my own rules to finally actually listen to it. I really like it. I mean, it's interesting because, the band had talked up how it was like this super heavy return to like 90s Blind Guardian and stuff like that. And in part, that is certainly true. But there are also these moments that strike me as like the best parts of all of the 21st century Blind Guardian releases. There are kind of Night at the Opera moments and Twist in the Myth moments and At the Edge of Time moments and Beyond the Red Mirror moments all over that album. It's a great combination of things. But yeah, I'm like really having a lovely time with that album. I'm so attached to that band that like I can't really give you like a great critical breakdown of anything because the truth is that I will probably just love whatever they do from now until they stop making music. You know what I mean? To the point where like, because the music industry basically doesn't make any financial sense anymore and everything is kind of broken, they've sort of inexplicably started a Patreon that you can subscribe to. And there's all of this like, whining and moaning in the comment sections on the videos where they're talking about how you can sign up to the Patreon of people being like, but I just paid for the special edition of your album. And I've supported you for 15 years, and and I see this, and I'm just like, man, let them get the bag, They've made, I don't even know how many legendary albums, right? Not including live albums. Battalions of Fear, Follow the Blind, Tales from the Twilight World, Somewhere Far Beyond, Imaginations from the Other Side, Nightfall in Middle Earth, A Night at the Opera, then I think it's A Twist in the Myth, At the Edge of Time, Beyond the Red Mirror, the orchestral album, and now this. There's like 12 like legendary albums, plus 2. Notice I say 2, not 3. Really great Demons and Wizards albums. There's the Sin Breed side project that the rhythm guitarist and the drummer have. Like all of the projects that these people are involved in, most of what they do is really good. They've created basically a lifetime's worth of music that you could theoretically spend the rest of your life poring over and coming to appreciate. Let them sell you $6 a month worth of iPhone shot concert footage. You know what I mean? Now, I say this, I myself have not subscribed to the Patreon because I don't know that I really need that in my life. But the existence of it, the fact that you can theoretically subscribe to it, doesn't bother me. Whereas this like really bothers some people. And so part of this is like, I'm just such a stan for this band that I don't care. You know, they can come up with any way to monetize what they do, and I'll pretty much support it, right? Anything that they do, bordering even probably on criminal, I would support them if they decided that it was in their best interest to do it, right? Now, the funny thing is that I'm definitely in the minority there, because if you look at all of the comments, it's people just like saying that this is the most horrific thing in the world. You would think that this was like the Chernobyl disaster or something, right? People are just like, I can't believe this. And, and it's like, just crazy. But I'm clearly in the minority there. But the funny thing is that I think if you go back, 2 decades ago, right, I would not be in the minority. There was, I think a sizable portion of the population at the time of like the Napster revolution that understood that basically the inevitable path that this was going to go down was that basically if you were a professional musician, you were not really going to make enough money by making music, by actually doing your art, right? By performing your craft. That was not going to be enough. And now it's at the point where the financial model is so screwed that why does Blind Guardian have a Patreon? It's because now we're at the point where not even touring really gives you the money that you need in order to fulfill your ambitions and your hopes for what you want to do with your music as a practicer of music, as a musician. This is something where it's like, okay, why are they starting a Patreon? Why is it like $6 a month or something like that? Do they really need that money? Probably not, right? Why is it so cheap? Right? If they really needed the money, wouldn't they want to try to up the price a little bit? It's like the reason that they're offering this is just because the dividends just continue to get smaller. And so you make that up in whatever way you can on the side, right? And so it's like, yeah, and we keep hearing this from musicians, right? Where if you were to really distill what rock musicians have been saying for the past decade, and you were to really align it in the chronology of how desperate they've gotten, right? Basically, a decade ago, this started with, or now more than a decade ago, right? You would start to hear these things from artists, like they would put posts on their Facebook, or they would be interviewed and asked questions about this, and it would be like, well, what can you do to support us? And basically, like, the progression of events went from like, well, we know that streaming is great, but streaming's not a huge deal yet. iTunes is really important, and there's this upstart thing called Spotify. It's not really taken over yet. Most of you are still like downloading stuff from iTunes. So, buying the album on iTunes is great. What's better than buying the album on iTunes is to buy a CD. That really like shows your support. That shows our label that you care. So if you can buy the album, buy it on iTunes. If you can afford to maybe spend a couple bucks more, buy the CD. Then a couple years passes. Then it's like, buying the CD would be great. We know that none of you are buying CDs anymore. There is this new thing that's popping up. There's this trend where people are buying vinyl again. Vinyl, that's a bigger investment. That really shows the label that you love us if you buy the vinyl. I know that most people don't have a record player, but it'd be great if you could buy the vinyl. And then a couple of years after that, it passes, and then it's like, oh, this streaming thing's really big. So I get it. I know that you can basically, the second that the album comes out, you can listen to the entire thing for free. It'd be great if you could just purchase it in some way, shape, or form. Digitally, like whatever, just some cash flow coming our way. And then a couple of years after that, and then it's like, buying the album is great. we're really kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel on the funds, and the label's really not happy with us. So come to the shows, please. Really come to the shows. Come to the shows. And then a couple more years pass, and we're kind of where we are currently, where it's like, yeah, of course, buy the album if you can. We know that's a huge ask. Come to the show if you like us. Again, you might have to, if it's not on a weekend, you might have to, log time off of work to come see us. We know it's a big ask. We know you might not be near a major metropolitan area. Please come to a show. And then, once you're at a show, if you could buy some merch, that would be awesome. Right? Right? Like, the demands every couple of years get more and more desperate from these artists because the amount of money that they can make off of releasing new music just gets so low with each passing year, And so it's kind of like we're in an interesting place where it's like, yeah, the next logical step is you bring one of your roadies, who has a cousin who has a really nice camera, get him to bring his cousin's camera on tour with you so that you can film every show. Not for a live DVD, because it's not going to have live DVD sound quality, but just to throw it up for the super fans on a subscription service or whatever, And it's the Blind Guardian guys, it's they're not super young, They're not going to they don't have the time or the energy to be more entrepreneurial than that. It's God, how can we incorporate some more cash flow into the 800 different things we already do? And basically the way they determine that is, just film live shows, film some behind the scenes stuff while we're making the album, some low effort stuff that might be special to a certain portion of our audience or something like that. It's that. If that's what they need to do, that's what they need to do. But I wanted to bring it up not only because of this thing, which is I noticed the whinging in all of the comments about the Patreon, and I thought that was interesting. And not only because I find the new album interesting, and I wanted to mention that I had finally heard the new album, but because I wanted to show you my dedication to this band, which is that, basically I think Blind Guardian is the only band for whom I have every release that they have ever put out. Which is not to say I have every remaster, because there's been there's the original albums, and then there's been 2 or 3 remasters of pretty much each album at this point. So it's not I have literally every time. I have some instance of every time they've released or re-released material. But what I mean is that I own physically, in one format or another, at least every single song that they have ever put out. So that includes weird bonus tracks, weird special editions of albums that have tracks that otherwise aren't heard, every sort of commercially available live recording. I think Blind Guardian is the only band for whom I have everything that they have ever put out in some physical format. And I wanted to show you this because I thought it was funny. My dedication to that is so extreme that I literally bought a little EP that the German edition of Metal Hammer magazine put out this month, that had a couple of obscure live recordings from just before the world shut down due to the pandemic or something. And literally it was only in the German edition of the magazine. So literally I am so dedicated to this mission of having every recording, no matter how obscure it is or whatever, that literally I'm not going to show my address on camera here, obviously, but I don't know if you can see that. It's the Deutsche Post. Oh yeah. Oh, it's from the Deutsche Post. It was 3.7 euros to ship it, and this is it has my name on it, and instead of it saying Mr. Nicholas, the way that you have to fill in the automated form when you're putting in your address, your mailing address for these things online, it says Herr Nicholas. It doesn't say Mr. It says Herr, Herr. So I thought I would show you that my dedication to this was so extreme that I actually purchased a German edition of a magazine that is published primarily in English nowadays, just because included in it is this little EP with a bunch of live tracks. That's how extreme the dedication here is. I'm gonna be like very upset if like the CD actually isn't in this. That would be shocking, wouldn't it? Vielen Dank für dein Metalhammer, Bestellung und dein damit verbundenes Vertrauen in unser Magazin. Hiermit erhältst du die Rechnung zu deiner Bestellung für deine Unterlagen. I can't speak German, in case you couldn't tell. Wow, this is very German. Wow, look at this. Look at this promo. 12 times maximum metal. Maximum Abo. Oh my god, guys, do you see that? It's jedes Heft für Kioskfrei Haus. That's awesome. I had no idea that einfach unkompromisiert. That's amazing. And then there it is. There they are. So I'm not going to be able to read a single page of this. If I want to read the interview in the magazine from the band, I'm going to have to like basically put the whole thing into like Google Translate. I'm going to have to take pictures of the pages and then let my phone pull the text out so that I can then copy it into a Google Translate tab. Are they new songs? So this is the funny thing. I think there's basically Bloody Yells, Secrets of the American Gods, Ninth Wave, Banished from Sanctuary, Born in a Mourning Hall, Lost in the Twilight Hall, Violent Shadows, and Sacred Worlds. So this was the thing about this. None of them are songs that you can't find anywhere else, but this is the only thing where this is the only physical edition of basically a bunch of these. So basically, there's a song from the album, which is basically intact identically to how it is on the album. So that's of no use to me. But then there are 7 other things that are of interest to me, right? So there's the single version of one of the tracks on the new album, right? So that's like a cut down version that I think is like a minute shorter or something like that. So the single cut of that track, this is the only physical version of that exists, at least at the moment. And then everything else is basically recordings from some obscure thing called the Bullhead Session. And as far as I can tell, what the Bullhead Sessions were a small group of artists were basically picked for the Wacken Metal Festival in Germany to basically do like a private concert for like mega donors to the festival or something like that. I'm not totally sure what these Bullhead Sessions were, but as far as I can gather, they were some concert associated with Wacken that wasn't Wacken 2020, basically. And so these were shows that I think happened sometime in 2019, and basically were recorded specifically for like some more private concert that was like smaller, or they were rehearsals or something like that. And basically these are also interesting to me as sort of a sort of armchair historian, armchair, sort of like person who's interested in like intellectual history and like the history of like culture and stuff like that, because basically these were recordings that were done in preparation for a big concert with a bunch of songs that they don't typically play live, that they were gonna do for Wacken 2020. And then basically Wacken 2020 happens, and because of the pandemic, it's this really depressing, like, remote thing. If anyone remembers this, I'm pretty sure the Wacken 2020 experience was there was no in-person show. They basically set up in a garage somewhere in Germany, and basically bands showed up, and what you could do is you could buy a ticket to Wacken 2020, and basically what that meant is that you could watch the bands perform live on your phone or computer, or if you had a VR headset, you could sort of be in a virtual crowd of people with your headset on, and you would have little commands to like clap or cheer, right? So this was an attempt to like emulate the atmosphere of like being at a show. And I think you could even do insane things, like you could become like part of a virtual circle pit or something like that, where it was very much like you can like someone hits a button and it's like initiate circle pit, because basically you would see videos of these bands performing at Wacken 2020, and then it would like zoom out, and basically it was like the band and then a giant room-sized green screen that was filled with this shot of this virtual crowd, and like you would see little lights spinning around, you would see like I think like little hands clapping and little robot voices going ah and stuff like that. It was like it's like how it, remember that NFL season was also so depressing because they had like they like piped in crowd noises. Like they like some of those stadiums, I think if I remember this correctly, like they put like speakers under the bleachers because no one was like allowed at these games. So you would have a guy where like when there was, when someone would have a really would have like a really, really great run, right? When they would go like, fucking 60 yards or something like that before they got tackled, or if they just ran the whole length of the field to a touchdown, I assumed that there was a guy in the box like hitting a button, like a big red button that just said crowd or something, and he would hit that and there would be fake applause and cheering and stuff like that. And you could literally tell watching this on TV from home that this was fake sound, right? And so that's basically what happened for Wacken 2020. It was just like, it was so bad. So basically, I just find this interesting because basically, essentially, I would say probably 4 of these songs are like pretty weird live recordings for them to do. So that they're sort of interesting as is. And then on top of that, they're from this sort of weird period where they, I think, were preparing for a set list for a festival that basically ceased to exist. Like the festival that they were prepping for never happened, essentially. So like 4 or 5 of these songs are sort of interesting for like anthropological reasons in that way. But yeah, so that's how dedicated I am to this band. And of course, the funny part about it is that it's like, it's not the most fun like drum band, because basically the music is all like really, for the drums at least, the music is like really straightforward. It requires like utter consistency. You can't really mess around at all. There's very little freedom in the arrangement. My favorite example of this actually I'll try to show you, is like, clearly there's some sort of editing involved in this process because it sounds too clean to probably be executable live. But there's a lot of stuff in Frederick, the new Blind Guardian drummer's repertoire, where he will do a really fast run, either like on the snare or on the toms or split between the two, that basically fills up a whole bar of 30-second notes. It's just like a raging single stroke roll. And then he comes out the other end of it, not missing a single note, with a quarter note on the snare. So there's a lot of parts in like Blind Guardian music where like it requires this insistent quarter note on the snare at 180 BPM. Like that's literally the snare pattern during a lot of the verses. But like Frederick will do stuff where basically he will like do a really busy fill. God, this cymbal is so annoying. He will do a really busy fill where literally up to the last note of the fill, your hand is doing a really fast roll around the kit. And then he comes out of it, with the hand on the snare again. Like he leaves no space for it. And so clearly there's probably some editing trickery there, but that's the studio album experience, is like they clearly want it to sound perfect. And so basically like they're kind of willing to put up with that. And some of it like seeing them live, it's like some of it clearly he actually does play anyway, even though it's really uncomfortable and weird to play, because that's just the sound that's demanded. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by showing you like how the old drummer, who I also love equally, Toman, how he would have played some of these parts and would have left space for his hands on the next downbeat coming out of a fill. And then I'll show you like a part, I can think of exactly the part I'll play from a newer Blind Guardian song where there's no space left anywhere for your hands. So I'll play like the easier, more natural way first. So he'll do a lot of stuff like that, where basically he'll the final notes of a drum fill will land on the double bass, so that basically you're coming back out of it with your hands freed up. See how in like both of those patterns, both this one and that other one, in both of those cases, you're leaving like a gap where your hands aren't hitting something. I'm trying to like explain this in like non-drummer vocabulary. There's at least like a note. There's a beat's worth of space where you don't have to be hitting something with your hands, so that you're coming back out of it still with the opportunity to get your hands back over to the snare drum. And then compare that to... I'll play that at full speed so you can hear what I mean. Lots of stuff like that where there's still some space. There's still space for your hands to move back to the correct position. Something like from one of the newer albums, you'll have something really weird where like you'll have a big snare drum fill, but then it'll land on the snare drum again for the next quarter note. So you just get like a flurry of notes, but it's still landing back on the downbeat on the snare anyway. I'll play for you specifically what I mean so you can hear what I'm saying. Let's see here. I'll play for you specifically the song I'm thinking of. One moment here. At the Edge of Time. So this is the second track on their album, I believe from 2012. I could be wrong about that. At the Edge of Time. This is Tana Lorne, Into the Void. Listen to these big snare rolls at the end of this song and how it's interchanged with the quarter note beat. So there's a lot of stuff that is in Blind Guardian's music that works in exactly that way. And I'll show you mechanically on the drums why something like that is so strange. Wait, I have to go. Which way do I have to go in order to not get tangled here? I can in fact go this way. Okay, good. So I'll just play that for you and maybe you'll see what I mean. So the thing about that is the transition out of the fill. So you have this. So like if you were like a normal drummer from planet Earth, you would not do that. Even if you wanted a big snare fill, you would make some sacrifice to the fact that you have to leave yourself some space to hit both a cymbal and the snare at the same time. And I should mention, this is not just with a fill like that that's just on the snare. He does it all over the place on the new album too, where you have a full run down the toms and the snare or whatever, but immediately on the next 30-second note, you're slamming back on the snare for a quarter note. All of this stuff like that, where it's like these big full velocity strokes that are clearly single stroke rolls, where basically your hand has like a single 30-second note or 64th note, depending on how you're counting it, to basically get from like here back to here. Like if you were to remove the leading hand out of the equation, that's how quickly you would have to get back to the snare. And you say, if you're a drummer, you say, well, that's easy. You just use your opposite hand. You just use some dexterity to move your hand over to the snare, which is naturally going to fall on the downbeat. You play something like this. But the problem is that in the context of the tracks, there's also, to mark time, pretty much always on a downbeat, there's also a crash cymbal or a China cymbal or some accent cymbal like that. So basically both of your hands are getting to a foreign surface from that last 30-second note anyway. So you're not really making it because then instead of your hand having to go from here to the snare, your hand would have to go from here to here or here to here. So in some ways it's like that option makes even less sense, right? And so clearly there's a little bit of studio magic there. But what it does mean is that, when you're replicating it in a way that actually allows you to practically modify these parts to play in a normal context, it means that there's no room in the arrangements. The arrangements are just so densely packed that whatever modifications you make, they don't allow for a high degree of your personal interpretation of the part or whatever. It's a lot of it is just very demanding, and the arrangement is strict enough that it's I really can't mess with where the accents are here or what the sticking is to a certain characteristic part or whatever, And even in the older music, it's like that. I mean, last week when I was playing I'm Alive, right, which is off of an older album with their old drummer, some of those parts are really burned into my brain. So there's 3 choruses in that song, and basically the fill going into pretty much each of them is pretty much burned into my brain. The first one I think I messed with a little bit in terms of the way it is on the album. But then the 2 after that, you kind of need to play as they are on the album. You can't really make up your own thing because they sound perfect, and they're almost identical. They have basically a 1-note variation on one another. But it's so vitally important that you get that right. The first fill is some just big raging single stroke roll, but then the next 2 change form. So I'll play the first one, and then you'll see what I mean with the last 2. Then the next 2 after that are variations on a pretty classic type of metal drum fill, actually weirdly similar to the Stairway to Heaven to Eagle Fly Free DNA, the fill of that we were discussing before. It's basically a variation on this idea. That falling down the stairs feel thing. And the reason that the variation that he plays on them is so characteristic is because the first time he plays a very common sticking to that type of fill, but messes with a single note. And then the second time around, he plays it the way that feels natural. So it's actually a kind of inverse thing where he starts with the weird variation, and then on the last chorus, he returns to the really solid, punchy feeling one. So I'll play actually the last one first so that you can hear what the normal version of this drum fill is. Something like that, where you basically have dun dun da. Something that you're bringing your lead hand up onto a cymbal with the bass drum underneath it. Now, the first time around that he plays it, he actually plays the note with the cymbal one off. I think he plays it one. He plays it one note late, quote unquote. So it actually, you have to play it with like the wrong hand, kind of. Like for me, because I'm left-handed, my left hand basically has reach, all around the kit. It's, I can reach anything with this arm. I can kind of play beats one-handed or something like that because, the range is good enough. The reach there is pretty full. This, because this half of my body's in the way, I can kind of reach this, I can kind of reach this, I can kind of reach this, and this, and this. But basically, this, and this are almost totally off limits to me, unless I'm bringing the rest of my body with me, right? So for like a big tom fill. So like I can hit those other surfaces, but I kind of need to let my other hand lead the way before I can really reach them, And so it's like very unnatural to place any sort of an accent on that hand in that way. But that's what he does. So basically the drum fill goes from the natural one to the unnatural one. I'll play the natural one first and then the unnatural. So that's the thing. I would say that this is characteristic of lots and lots of Blind Guardian's music. Is like the part is perfect, and the part is straightforward, and the part is really metal, It sounds so good, and there's no room for you to mess with it. To the point where I would say that there's even really a characteristic Blind Guardian beat, which I feel like I need to play here. So I'll play I'm Alive. The Blind Guardian beat is what you hear in I'm Alive. It's basically you take the most classic heavy metal fill, right, which is essentially what Bill Ward plays all over the place in the drum solos of War Pigs, but basically split between all four of your limbs. So his drum fill is just on the hands. It's just da 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 da. The classic Blind Guardian drum beat is just that, except snare and a cymbal on the quarter notes. Maybe you play eighth notes on the cymbal, and then you just fill in the notes that are played with the feet underneath it, which is actually a really weird drum beat. It's like very uncommon to hear it, because basically none of the bass drums, you're not hitting a bass drum at any time that you're also hitting the snare. Like they never line up. They're always off kilter from one another. But you'll hear it. You'll hear it in I'm Alive, which I'm going to play now because I've talked for so long. See, I was thinking about it because I talked about it for like 20 minutes. So I messed it up. I got in my head about it. That's so sad. Yeah. Yeah, you can hear the classic Blind Guardian beat in there. Which is like a more typical metal beat if you remove the extra foot. But the weird thing is that you have your weak foot landing on the landing on the downbeat. You know, normally it's in between beats, and here the natural place where it would sit is kind of on top of like one of the eighth notes. Da, 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 da. Yeah, that was pretty good. Besides that fill, which is going to annoy me, because it makes me think if I play it again, I'm going to mess it up just because I'm already thinking about it. But I might have just one more go at it, and then we'll move on to some new stuff. Pretty much better. Pretty much better. Those fills are still sneaking up on me, but I think it's because I talked about them. So of course they're creating problems for me because I'm thinking about them too much, which is a bad habit. I should find a way to get over. But with that, maybe I'll just play something that we've played historically that I've been trying to nail, just without talking about it at all, just to see how it goes. So here we go. Symphony X Domination. Oh, that's what I was looking for like 3 or 4 weeks now. Was something pretty close to that. Now, I'm very happy with that. The problem is that, and I don't know. I'm assuming that, Mom, you are the only person that is on at the moment, which is fine. Once again, I'm doing this for my own enjoyment. You'll have to tell me if the music was way too loud in comparison to the drums there, because even to me, the music was too loud for the drums. The thing I'm noticing, though, is that I feel like I need the music to be about that loud a lot of the time. So it would be delightful if I was sort of wrong about that and actually the balance on that was okay. But what I suspect is that was probably at least a couple dBs too loud on the music and not loud enough on the drums. I feel like I am still figuring out, no, the balance was okay. I really hope that it sounds okay out in the world, because I feel like I need the music to be that loud. But I feel like it might be drowning out some of the sound of the drums. The problem is really that I still feel like I have yet to balance everything in a way that I am fully comfortable with. So, I love my little mixer over here, and it has served me very well. But the combination of the mixer with the in-ear monitors that I'm using, there is and I've noticed it when I've listened back to the streams, in my ears there is so much more latent like noise. Like the noise floor is like, I mean, it's pretty aggravating actually. Like there's a pretty consistent hiss in my ears. Like there are things in terms of just the sound balancing that I've noticed in my ears is really extremely off compared to what's actually getting projected to the stream. So that was a case where like the music there was overwhelmingly loud in my ears and my drums were too quiet. Like they weren't totally cutting through. But honestly, I haven't really found an alternative to that at this point. Like I kind of feel like to a certain degree that was actually sort of the appropriate balance in terms of how loud the music was. It's just that I wish I could make the drums pop out of the mix on my end a little bit more. But I'm not succeeding at getting that to work. But, if you're saying that the balance of that sounded okay, then that's really good, because I feel like the music is actually at a comfortable volume in my ears. It's just that I wish I could boost the drums in proportion to it a little more without it overcrowding the sound of the track, because I really need to hear the tracks. Yeah. So again, I mean, like I promised on literally the first episode of this thing, if you're along for the ride on this, you're kind of along for hearing me try to work out, the tech and work out some of the more annoying parts of this along the way. But no, that was the take of that I was basically looking for. I mean, still some minor flubs there that I wish I could just go back and totally perfect and take out of the mix. But I'm happy with that. So maybe look for some sections of that on Instagram, assuming that I can figure out how to actually make these videos the 1:1 aspect ratio that Instagram wants, because they don't you can't really post rectangular formatted videos, which is so annoying. But yeah, I was pretty satisfied with that. Cool. Let's see here. Cool. Sorry, I'm just like so happy that I got a take of that I'm a little speechless actually. Let's try Ghost of Perdition again by Opeth. That was a fun one. Should I try Ghost of Perdition or should I try the other Opeth that I was playing last week? I think I might want to try the other one. I feel like I have a more solid grasp of the other one. I don't know. You know what I'll do? Actually, to determine if I can play Ghost of Perdition, what I'm gonna do is just without the music, I might try to play the part with the really fast double bass, because I don't know if my feet are really up to it at the moment. My feet feel a little wiggity still, even after playing for a little bit here. So let me just try to play that section without any music, and then I can tell you if I feel up to it. Okay. How do I need to turn here? I need to turn this way. Ah. Kinda. You can hear it starts to. You can hear the feet in that fast section start to slip a little bit, but I can usually sort of finish out the measure in the right place, which I'm aware, I've watched enough of guys like, the 80/20 drummer on YouTube and stuff like that to know that having the meta time correct, but having the micro time wrong is kind of a bad habit. But here's all I'll say. The 80/20 drummer is not playing 200 plus BPM double bass. So I think, I hate to say, at the point that I'm at, if I want to be able to play anything, a little bit of, how shall we say, time dilation is going to be necessary for me to find a way to tolerate here. So it's still pretty close. So maybe we'll try it. We'll try Ghost of Perdition. Let me just go over, let me think out loud here about the trouble spots in that song. So the kind of bridge section occasionally gives me trouble. The riff there is something like dun da 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 dun dun da dun. That section, that guitar part is almost not even a riff. It's really just kind of like a lead. And so it's floaty enough that sometimes I want to rush it and slip out of time a little bit. So I need to watch the time there and be very confident about where the downbeats are. That's, I would say, the first trouble spot. What else? The drum fills in the quiet tom part in the first section of the song. Devil cracked the earthly shell, foretold she was the one. He opened to the room, said you have to live before you die young. The second time around, that part comes in, you play the pattern that the guitar is matching, but you play it on the snare and not the toms, but you play it with like a bunch of flams and stuff. I don't want to get too stressed out about that, because if I think about it too hard, I miss it, or I forget that it's there. I just sort of get caught up in it, but it's really easy. It just flows naturally. There's no reason to get like caught up in it. What else? The big drum fill, actually, that I just played, which is kind of before that section leading to the fast double bass. It's a big 6/8, 12/8 fill or something like that. Again, just need to have really, really clear and concise time there. There's a lot of notes flying past you. It would be easy to like get caught up in that. And then what else? Coming out of the fast double bass section, there's that weird phrasing at the end of it. The only way that I can think to count it is basically as like a bar of 11, like 11/8, followed by a bar of like 5, which I know adds up to 16. So I know that it's a measure of 4/4, but the phrasing is so weird that I would rather count it that way. And then the last part is big and open and operatic sounding, and it's really easy to rush. So there's a lot of trouble spots in that song, but we're gonna go on a little adventure here and hope that I can actually, tolerate all of those and remember where all of them are and get past them. So we're gonna see. Oh, imagine that. If you don't overthink it, you can actually play it correctly. Oh man. Okay, so that's evidence there of, I would say, two things. First, maybe probably, well, certainly most importantly, exactly what I just said. I've been overthinking in all of these because it's very unnerving to have cameras in front of you. So I've been overthinking, even though there's an audience of like 0 in the room with me and an audience of like maximum of 30 on the YouTube channel, right? So like there's literally 0 consequences, but I still psych myself out anyway. So if you don't overthink it, it works. Secondly, the music needed to be louder in my ears. Like that's literally like probably 40% of the timing issues that I had with that song was just the music needed to be like a touch louder. That's it. That is so funny. That is so funny how much easier that felt to play that. Of course, still dropped a stick somewhere in there, but it's kind of at an okay moment to drop a stick, honestly. It's a part with kind of slow double bass, just kind of consistent. I had a second to grab another one there, you know. I'll take that, you know. I'll take the L on that if it means the rest of it sounds pretty good. Oh man. Could you talk about the use of drum triggers in fast metal drumming? Okay. Well, yeah, so this is a very this is a debate like, this is like, a debate as old as, Plato asking his students after telling them the story of the ring of Gyges, right? Whether man is inherently just or inherently unjust, right? This is this is an argument that has been raging for about as long as that argument. This is like an unsolvable argument since the dawn of time, basically. Because it mostly just has to do, much like the Ring of Gyges story, it mostly just has to do with people's perspectives on things and the sort of instincts that they have for things. So the use of drum triggers. So assuming you know basically nothing about what the term triggering means in the context of percussion, the simplest way that I could explain it is actually just to tell you that the entire reason that you can hear this stream is a result of drum triggers. Because that's essentially what you're talking about when you're talking about an electronic kit. That's a trigger. That's a trigger. That bass drum's a trigger. And why are those things triggers? Well, the reason that those things are triggers is because a trigger is essentially a digital tool which is basically recognizing when something is being hit or when sound is being produced by something. And it's basically taking the data about the sustain of that sound, the velocity of how hard the object is being hit that is producing that sound, and basically interpreting those and saying, okay, well, basically, we can take, the sustain of a given instrument and how hard a given instrument is being hit, and we can basically change the actual sound of that to be whatever you want to input the sound as. So when I'm doing this, so this is my basic hi-hat pedal noise. When I'm scrolling around on the pre-programmed kits that Alesis provides in the module for this set of pads, let me do that here. Right? All those sounds are different. They're all changing to different pairs of hi-hats. Let me get back to my original kit here. There's my kit. The reason that it's able to do that is because it is basically just taking the input of me hitting the pedal physically with my foot. And it's going, okay, well, how hard is he hitting that? And it's going, okay, well, that's supposed to be a hi-hat chicking sound. So it has a really short, half-life before the sound decays, basically. And so basically we're just going to sense how hard that's being hit, and then whatever the sound profile that's been selected on the kit, we'll just output that as the sound. So that's like literally the most technical way to explain it, is just that basically what you're talking about when you're talking about a trigger is you're talking either about an electronic kit where basically the entire method of how it's outputting sound that isn't literally just the sound of the pad being physically like whacked with a stick, right? The way that it's outputting the sound so that it sounds like drums is basically a result of triggers, which is basically just taking input data about how you're hitting an object, where you're hitting an object, all of that information, and is then just taking a specific sound profile and then outputting that, right? Where it gets more interesting, obviously, is when you're talking about using triggers on an acoustic drum kit, right? Because in theory, an acoustic drum kit, right, is producing its own sound, right? It's not just producing the sound of you hitting something with a pad, right? It's producing the sound of a drum. So why is there all of this conversation about metal drummers and very technical, very fast guys using triggers? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. I would say that, the older school version of this would be a term that maybe even some old heads, right, who aren't as familiar with this world of triggers and stuff like that would know, which is the term sample replacement, right? So sample replacement is like what is happening on Mike Portnoy's drum kit on the album Images and Words by Dream Theater. The reason why those cymbals and that snare drum on that album sound so, think of how beautiful that kind of weird gospel intro is to Pull Me Under. Why do those drums sound so mystical and magical, right? It's basically because they sort of digitally replaced the sound of the actual drums with the sound of drums that they manipulated to have that sound, basically. So what you're hearing on that album is you're hearing the drums as he hit them, right, in terms of the level of volume that they're being struck at, and, the level of, like the dynamics of how he's hitting them. And then you're also hearing sort of different voices depending on what he hit, right? But what's being changed is basically that the sound is taken from basically drums that they've edited in, essentially. So it's basically like, I could record, beatbox noises with my mouth, right? And basically, if we were to sample replace a drum kit with them, I could play things on the drums. And then if I recorded several hundred different samples of like, okay, here's a beatbox snare at maximum velocity. Ka! Right? And then, okay, here's a beatbox snare at pianissimo. K! Right? and we did basically every volume range in between those two, we could theoretically put me on an acoustic kit, record me, and if we use the correct digital alchemy, right, we could basically replace it so that essentially we could basically put those sounds in the place of my actual drums. And it wouldn't be cheating, right? Because basically you would still hear my actual dynamics of my playing, how hard I was hitting, where the notes were landing in time and stuff like that, right? It's just that the sound would be changed in with something less conventional. That's all it is, right? Now, that's essentially what triggers allow you to do. Triggers allow you to really easily sort of replace samples of sounds with whatever you want them to be, right? And so, let's say, as with how many metal bands now do operate, your lead songwriter is your lead guitarist. And let's say that your lead guitarist finds a guitar tone that they really, really want to use for the album that you're about to record. They go, this is the sound. This is the sound of the album, right? And let's say it's really bass heavy, right? It's got a big, chunky, rounded out sound in the bass frequencies of the guitars, right? And like, let's say the bass itself is like really down there, really thumping, right? It's a bass heavy sound. Well, the problem that you're going to encounter there as a drummer is that you're going to be playing heavy metal, which means that you're going to be playing probably some busy double bass stuff, right? Like maybe you're not even playing stuff that's particularly fast. Maybe you're playing something like is on the new Blind Guardian album, right? Something that's not 200 plus BPM, 30-second notes or something like that. Let's say, maybe you're a more doomy old school metal band. You're still probably going to have some double bass, and maybe it sounds like this. Some stuff that, particularly by modern standards, is, mid-tempo, nothing crazy busy, stuff that if you were to isolate the drums, you could hear very clearly what the pattern was. You can hear that and you can go, oh, the bass drum's going dun-dun, digga-digga-dum, dun-dun, digga-digga-dum. It's not too fast, it's not too busy, whatever. The problem you're going to encounter there is that your bass drum is such a bassy frequency naturally in the room, right? That, if you think that you're going to go in there and you're going to be John Bonham, right? And you're just going to go, no, my drums, I know how to tune them perfectly to get exactly the right sound out of them. I know how they're supposed to sound. They sound so good right now. The shells are really warm and they're broken in and the heads are broken in. Everything sounds awesome, right? The problem you're going to encounter is like, okay, but what you're immediately running up against is that your guitarist in your doom metal band or whatever it is that you're in has come up with a guitar tone that's like, whoa, listen to how crazy my guitar tone is. And he plays it and it's like, right? And it might be the coolest, nastiest, baddest sounding guitar tone that you've ever heard. Okay? Well, here's the problem. What you are immediately going to discover is that you can't hear the bass drum. It's just muddied in with the frequencies of those guitars. So you immediately encounter an issue here, which is that, okay, so basically all you can hear is like the cymbals and the snare. I might as well like not be playing the bass drum because it's just this like thunderous rumble that is like totally indistinguishable. So the good thing about triggers is that what it allows you to do is it allows you to almost infinitely use your creative abilities to manipulate the overall sound of the band, because basically what it lets you do is you know, get whatever guitar and bass tones you want, put whatever effects on whatever, you can have the busiest part in the world. You can have a full orchestra, right? The full range of orchestral frequencies. Make the rest of the music as busy as you want. Okay? What triggers will let you do is basically decide, okay, well, the drums are just a mess of frequencies, right? More so than any other instrument, right? The drums are composed of like white noise and pink noise, right? And the amount of frequencies on a drum, if you look at the frequency mapping of like a cymbal, it's just every frequency, right? Right? Like every frequency that's audible to the human ear and some that aren't is included in like a cymbal. So basically what that means is that, it lets you have your guitarist have their crazy tone. And then basically what you can say is like, okay, well, the bass drum can't just be this thunderous rumble with no definition. So we're going to make it punchier. We're going to lessen the sustain so that it's not like coo when you hit the bass drum. It's like coo, right? It's clipped sounding so that you get rid of some of that excess noise in the mix. And then maybe digitally, the sample that we put in is we take that bass drum note, but maybe we pitch it up a whole step or something. So instead of, basically we've removed the sustain from the noise of the bass drum, and then we move it up so that it's more within, closer to a mid-range. So the original product that you have is that the bass drum is going goo. And now you've cut the sustain off and you've pitched it up a whole step. So now it's coo, coo, coo. So now instead of your bass drum going now you have right? Something much more defined, much more audible in the mix. And you're exactly right to say that there's a slippery slope aspect to this, which is that in and of itself, I think probably most people would agree is, it's a bit weird. It's sort of a bit like maybe overcomplicated for the way that people used to make music comparatively. But, people before the digital era did all sorts of insane shit, right? I mean, there's all those stories about the drum sound of Led Zeppelin where it's like, oh, there were, we were in this manor and we put microphones next to his drum kit and then at the top of a staircase. And then we mixed those two together and that's his drum sound or something like that, right? There's all sorts of stories about crazy shit that people were doing in the pre-digital age. So in some ways, this is like, okay, this is just, one more thing in a long legacy of like really complex creative tools. And I would say that that's really the story with triggering as is like that's where the conversation about triggering ends, is that it's basically letting you pick your sounds, right? And maybe that's a weird creative tool, but it's a creative tool nonetheless. And I think most people who make music would agree that that can be a useful creative tool, is to be able to modulate sounds in such a way where everything is coming through with clarity and with exactly the sound profile that you're looking for. The problem is not so much with triggering as such, it's this slippery slope aspect, which is that basically in order to mess with these things, you're basically putting things into a digital audio workshop, right? Like Pro Tools or something like that. And that's the mechanism that's allowing you to mess with the sounds. But because you're already messing with the sounds in a digital audio workshop, what you also have is the option to just add or subtract notes that are coming from the trigger signal chain, right? If you want. So, someone accidentally skitters in an extra bass drum at the end of a big quad fill. Okay, well, you can just get rid of it. So that's sort of how it starts. It's like, oh, we're just going to clean things up around the edges. But then, slowly but surely, what you get is like, okay, well, but, how about we like tempo map it, right? And then you go to the guitarist and you say, what would you say the BPM of this song should be? Because you recorded it to a metronome. I know you recorded it to a metronome, but there's some time dilation issues here and there. What was your click set to? And then they go, I think it was like 170. So you go, okay, well, let's lock the drums to 170. And then basically you stretch the whole thing out or compress it based on if the drummer's maybe a little bit behind the beat or a little ahead of the beat, whatever they need. And then basically, you just sort of clean it up and you systematize everything, right? And basically at the end of it, what you have is, the sort of boomer take on this is like, oh, it's like a computer rather than a person playing the drums. I actually think it's more pernicious than that, right? Because there's a lot of great, Aphex Twin, all that stuff. It's like there's a lot of great computer music, right, that still has a person behind it. I'm not as concerned with that. I think it's almost more perverse, which is that it's not a computer instead of a drummer. It's actually like the producer instead of the drummer. It's just a person who's now in the booth or whatever, who's just messing with stuff, right? And so I don't know. I mean, I'm also aware that a lot of my favorite albums clearly are cleaned up to hell. We were talking about Ghost Reveries, the album by Opeth last week. It's not like I'm not aware that, Lopez's drumming is cleaned up all over that album. I'm sorry. You can hear recordings of the guy live. He's one of my favorite drummers of all time. I think he's hugely underrated. I think he's a legend. I think he's a creative genius. I think he was perfect for that band on the albums that he was on. I think no one could have done that job better. In some ways, it sort of does feel to me like Opeth was a different band after he left. It was no longer Opeth. It was some other band that I still like, but it's not Opeth. It's like some other band. I'm sorry. You can hear him live. I know his kick drum is not that clean. I know in that part of Ghost of Perdition, he did not go into the studio and his feet did not go perfectly in time. I know he did not do that perfectly in time. And it's not because I struggle with that part. I'm not saying that, I'm equivalent to any of these players. I know that they are leagues beyond me. I have no ego about this. I'm saying you can find live recordings. I know what his time feel is like. I know how he plays. I'm sorry. He did not play that with that consistency of volume and at that consistency of tempo. I know that was cleaned up. And I'm not saying I have a problem with things being cleaned up. Blind Guardian is obviously cleaned up. It's obvious that there are edits. We were just talking about this stream. The idea that you're going to do a big 2-measure long fill, like a prog rock Neil Peart fill down the length of a drum set's worth of toms, above your head down to your knee. The idea that you're making that fill with matching double bass for every stroke on the hands underneath it, and then you're ending the fill on like a 30-second note on the hands, and then within the span of a single 30-second note, you're getting your hands back to the snare and a crash cymbal to make a downbeat to continue with the fast, metal drum pattern. Obviously that's cleaned up. You're not doing that. You're not going bah with double bass underneath. You're not landing that. I'm sorry, you know. I know that you know there's studio magic, but I am not so gullible as to think that, like, you know, as a lot of older people seem to, that, like, yeah, their favorite bands just never cleaned up parts like that. So, like, I'm really not even opposed to this cleaning up thing. It's like the technical efficiency there is an aesthetic thing, right? It actually does provide the music a certain choice. And if you want to call it cheating, you call it cheating. But it does have a certain aesthetic quality to it, which is that if you don't want everything to sound like Norwegian black metal, right, where it's just a mess of sound, you know, in a modern metal context, some of these compositions need super technical, super precise production like that, and triggering is a main part of that, right? But there are just so many classic examples at this point of, like, people obviously faking their drum parts, and you can find stories online of people talking about, like, yeah, like I remember this was one of the most legendary ones that I ever heard. I wish I could remember what band this was in reference to. It might have been the wonderfully named group Woods of Ypres. But there was a story that I did read from someone that said that basically the studio trickery meant that basically this really busy, black metal album that they were playing, super techy sounding black metal album, the drummer literally never once in the studio went into the studio and recorded more than one limb at a time. Let that sink in. So what that means, just to clarify, is, like, I'm not even going to be able to play a drum part that's fast or busy enough to give you a sense of why this type of thing would be justified, but I can try. I'm not really going to be able to give it to you, but I'll just give you an example just as a sort of teachable moment. So what that means is, like, let's say you have a crazy blast beat where it's really fast unison hands, and basically underneath it the feet are going double time. So the hands are already really fast, and then the feet underneath it are going twice as fast. See, I told you I can't even really give you the example, but I'll try. So together, I guess it would be something like this. This is going to sound awful. Sounds like shit, but, I'm trying to give you an example of something that someone couldn't readily do. And as we've said, I can't really play blast beats very well, so this is a good example, because this would be a case where, like, literally, if a guitarist asked me to play this, like, I would probably, as the drummer, have to do this in studio. What this person means by saying that they didn't record a single limb in tandem is what they mean by that is that basically they recorded 4 separate mixed down drum tracks. And basically, one track is left arm, one track is right arm, one track is left foot, one track is right foot. And what that meant is that to create this beat, the way that they recorded that was not that the guy went in there and played that flawlessly. He went in and he played this. And then he went in and he played this. And you can even hear there, probably that's exactly how he played it. And then the producer goes, some of those hits on the foot were quieter than others. How about we just equalize the volume there? And then he went into the studio and he went in with his other foot and went. And again, they went, oh, that's his off foot. That one's even weaker. Just equalize the volume on all those. Equalize the velocity. And then he went in and he did this. And then basically they mixed all of those together. And then what you're hearing on the album is. Except not like that, but literally in perfect time, like atomic time, right? Because it's locked to a grid, locked to a metronome at whatever BPM that is. I think that's like 190. And it's perfect. It sounds perfect because they made it perfect in a DAW software. And so that's something that's almost beyond triggering, right? Because that's not just, okay, we're going in and we're picking the sounds that we want for these instruments. And, maybe we're changing the sensitivity a little bit so you can hit a drum, kind of soft. But instead of producing a soft sound like this, you can make it so that it sounds like, even though you're hitting it this hard, we're upping the sensitivity so that it sounds like you're going, but it sounds like, no, this is beyond that. This is beyond your picking the sound profile you want for the instrument. This is a larger question that goes beyond triggers, right? This is just a question about basically like the ethics of what you are willing to do as a band or an artist and how much you're willing to compromise your sound, quote unquote, quality. And I don't know. I mean, to this day, as someone who likes metal music, it's like you kind of have to just acclimate yourself to the fact that most of the albums you're going to hear that come out on a major label are going to sound totally perfect, and that is not a real depiction of the performance that happened in studio. You just have to sort of make your peace with that as a listener. And yet, I still find myself very attracted to new albums that come out, even from bands that I know nothing about, when I can hear a guitarist come in, a 64th note late, or when I can hear a roll on a snare drum where one of the hits is like kind of wimpy sounding, Of course, the band that was sort of the master of this, and still is, even though their sound is now much more simplified, is, of course, Mastodon, where the drums are just flying around, and there's all sorts of sound inconsistencies, and they kind of he sounds like he's playing like a grunge kit or something, because it's a little slippery and weird, you can actually hear that kid is basically flush with real human dynamics when he's playing, and obviously they're playing to a metronome, but he's really executing those parts. It's like, yeah, there's a click in his ear. Everyone's playing to the same tempo. It's not fully Black Sabbath, just like go in and play your songs at whatever speed you want. No, they're playing to a metronome. But he's not, that's like minimally corrected, Crack the Sky. Just listen to Crack the Sky. You'll hear exactly what I mean. Listen to the album Crack the Sky. That's like the ultimate in terms of like, wow, those are drums that really catch your ear because they sound so natural. And it's in the context of this kind of epic modern metal album. So yeah. I don't know that I have any sort of larger lesson or takeaway from that, but yeah, that's kind of my, if I had to give you the TLDR version of that, it would just be to say, triggers, people like to focus on them, I guess, still to this day, I guess, as sort of a source of woe in some contexts and sort of the savior of the sound of modern metal in other ways. I'm sort of in neither of those camps. I think that it's basically a useful tool for many artists, and that if you're going to try to seek out a problem for the homogeneity of the sound of a lot of modern metal, the triggering of the instruments is not really your problem. Your problem is basically the presence of Pro Tools or Ableton in all of these production studios. And if you want to get rid of that, you would basically have to either resolutely decide as a band to minimize the use of those things, or you would need to basically decide that you were just going to record it completely old school on like tapes, right? Those are like your solutions, is like either you really have to be intentionally prudent to not use this software as a crutch, or you just have to resolutely say, no, we're not going to record it that way. Which is why I have so much, which is why basically actually my favorite Meshuggah album is The Violent Sleep of Reason, which is not a popular choice. Like everyone's favorite album is one of the older ones, basically. Is because, they didn't, those songs are not one take songs, but the way that they did that album is they recorded a bunch of takes of each track. And then basically they tried to take the biggest chunks possible. So they would go like verse 1, and then they would basically select the best verse that the whole band sort of played together live in a studio. And then basically they go, okay, well and then there's the bridge, and then there's the chorus. And then they would take the best bridge and the best chorus. So basically there's editing in the sense that different takes are stitched together, but that's a practice that's universal across all professional level productions now, but basically it was like, yeah, beyond that, we are not going to edit it past that point. Like we're just going to stitch together the best takes of each individual part of each of these tracks. And then beyond that point, we're just going to leave it at that. We're just going to take the best parts, and the songs will stand on their own, and their individual takes will stand on their own, and they will, kind of hold up over time, because the quality of the playing is very high, because it's Meshuggah, so they're legendary. And then the sound of it is also very real, because it has like a real time feel of guys playing in a studio together in little boxes with headphones on, actually live playing the instruments together, right? And to me, it's like that is the way forward. Because if Meshuggah can make an album that is as technically precise as a Meshuggah album is, and they can do it in a way where they are taking big unedited pieces of recordings and stitching them together and weaving them together into a song that way, where you have big sections of live playing together as a band, then, whatever your stupid fucking SoundCloud technical death metal project is, can also do that. Like, I hate to say, it's like, if Meshuggah can do it, everyone can do it. No one is beyond, it's not like anyone's beyond Meshuggah, right? It's like, if they're doing it, it means that everyone should be able to execute in real time on their instruments at that level of quality. And the rest of us don't have an excuse. If Meshuggah can do it, then we should be able to. We can't go, but it doesn't sound good enough unless I stitch it together in this really unnatural, crazy way. It's like, no. You know what music is really unnatural and crazy and technical? Meshuggah. And they did it in a much more naturalistic way. So none of us have any excuse. Okay. That was a lot of talking. I'm going to play again. I don't know what I'm going to play. It'll be a surprise.
light. In flames of dance, eternal rain, we rise against the fire. When the night is falling, in times of awful light, the same evil has to fall, so wreck the world tonight. Fighting hard, for it, steal from the wastelands evermore. The skeleton souls will be born, not wasted on the shores. On the blizzard waves, we wash the past and more.
Whew, man. That's a song that you want to, for showmanship's sake, exaggerate just a tiny bit. Because that's, one of the corniest songs ever made, right? But it's so good. Oh, it's so good. I actually, I'm sure a lot of people do, but we were never a Guitar Hero household. I think we all thought it was, kind of silly, because it's why not just learn to play an instrument? Which, I don't know, maybe that's a boomer take or something like that, but I feel like that's just also the obvious take. Shouldn't you just learn to play a real instrument? But I have pretty vivid memories of that song being in Guitar Hero for the first time, and people losing their mind over that song. I remember forum conversations back in the day, and the early Amazon reviews of that album, where people would say insane shit the guitar solo is impossible. People would just say it's clearly fake. It's clearly a computer using guitar samples. Or people would come up with even more sort of interesting conspiracy theories where it's clearly they duct taped the guitar to the table and played it on the table so that they didn't have to physically manipulate it with their hands. They had one guitarist doing the fret work and the other doing the picking work or something like that. And it was no, go watch the live recordings. They play it. They're great. That was DragonForce. That was Through the Fire and Flames by DragonForce. Not only through the fire, but also through the flames as well. Yeah, that's a fun one. And I think their drummer now is this very, very cheerful looking Italian man who I think before joining DragonForce had a career playing in obscure death metal bands or whatever, and now is playing that stuff, which is to him that's probably the equivalent of playing smooth jazz or something. You're oh, these songs, they max out at 200 BPM. There's no blast beats. Cool. He's probably just back there grooving, having the time of his life back there. G. Anzalone or whatever. That's his name. It just popped into my head as I was describing him. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing song. I actually really like. They have a sort of latter day album from maybe 2017 or something like that I actually unironically really love. Called Reaching into Infinity, I think. I think Falling into Infinity is the Dream Theater album. I think Reaching into Infinity is the one I'm thinking of, which is the DragonForce album. Actually, unironically really like that. They have a song about the Epic of Gilgamesh on it. Of course, it's incredibly corny, but man, it's all fun. They're just having a good time. And the guitar work, of course, is really impressive. It's phenomenally impressive. And the drums are fun because it's just no excuse, just fun oompa beats. I feel like I should play something else. I had another thing planned for today besides going through the Metal Hammer, the German edition of the Deutsche edition of Metal Hammer magazine. I did have another thing planned, but I've been doing this for so long that I don't really know. I don't really know that it's wise for me to continue. I might just want to play a little bit more to finish it out and then say what I was going to do for next time. I feel like this has been, the whole stream so far has been very Eurocentric, and I don't want to give off that impression. So I think I'm going to play the opening track off of Machine Head, their album The Blackening, which is called Clenching the Fists of Dissent, which is a hell of a song, and it's really great. It's also got a weird outro, so I'm not totally sure when I'm gonna exactly stop playing. Maybe I'll just carry on even when the outro is going. But I like this song like changed my life when I heard this, because I was like, wow, you actually can make a 10-minute plus long song that isn't just about, like, you know, the Iliad or something like that. You know, like I was like, wow, you can actually do a song that's like long and is a story and really takes you on an adventure that is like crunchy and metal and isn't just like, yeah, about well, the Epic of Gilgamesh or something like that. Yeah, so this is a great song, and it's long and it's very metal. Pretty much the whole time. There's like an intro and an interlude that are kind of weird, but I've tried to kind of adapt them to sound nicer. On just a single drum kit without the studio overlays, I've tried to like find a way to tastefully play it, and I think it works actually. So I really love this one. This one's like a romp. It's just fun and it's loud and it's pissed off. It's like a perfect song. So yeah, here we go. Clenching the Fists of Dissent, which is a mouthful. There's nothing quite like Bush era liberalism to generate sort of sufficient sounding anger in a metal band. How the times have changed, kind of, I guess. Probably not at all, actually. So the as you can hear, this cymbal is now like pretty much. Oh god, you can't even see it. It's this one. It's almost like officially shot at this point. It's like I just hit it once and it just goes. Brrsh. I've ordered a replacement cable. I searched around for one that reviews said was basically indestructible, and I'm gonna try to put that there. A, because I do actually think it's the cable and not the cymbal pad itself, and B, because I'm also sort of hoping against hope that it's not the cymbal pad, because it's easier to replace a cable and less expensive to replace a cable than it is to replace a cymbal pad. You know what I mean? So hopefully that will be fixed by the next time I stream. Yeah, but as you could hear, that was just clattering around. That cymbal was just clattering around back there, like the entire time I was playing. So, yeah, that's getting annoying, but it's fine. Okay, what do I have here? For some reason, I have "November Rain" by Guns N' Roses in my Moises app. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to isolate the guitar solo. Let's see. What else do we have here that we could do? I want to do something fun and fast. Let's see. I know what we can do. We can do Blackened again. I couldn't really nail Blackened by Metallica last week. So maybe we'll try it again. And then we'll finish it out, because I've been going for ages and ages here, man. Oh my god. Okay. All right. We're going to do Blackened. Maybe chat for a minute, and then I'm going to be done. Hopefully this doesn't suck. I mean, maybe I'll have to play this twice, but we'll see.
Nothing left to kill. Never seen before. Breathing nevermore.
That was going so well too. Did you hear that? Let me see if I can replicate that. I'm hitting just anything on this kit, and that cymbal is now going. Wow. Ghost cymbal. Yeah. You know what? I think I can't do that anymore. It's generating so much noise. It's like ruining the sound. It's also making it like impossible for me to concentrate. I think I'm just unplugging it. Hate to say. God, I can't even unplug it. It's like it's alive and it doesn't want to die. Get out! Get out! Get out! Ugh. Christ. What the hell, man? God, that was annoying because I felt good that time around too. Well, I guess we're just gonna do it without a second crash or without a China. We'll just make do. Okay. Take two. Take two. Black and Metallica. Too distracted that time around. We're gonna get it. I swear to God. We've done 2 songs like perfectly tonight. We're gonna do a third one. think there were probably 2 unforgivable mistakes there, given how long I've been listening to that album for and how many times I played that song. The fact that I still, each time I've tried to play that on stream, I mess up that fill coming out of like the breakdown section that goes into like the part that feels weird with the weird time signature. Or whatever it is. The part before that, there's that fill. That's what it's kind of meant to sound like. And I know exactly how to play it, and every time I sort of slightly want to mess around with the sticking or change it around a little bit, and it's always a bad idea, and I keep doing it to myself. Each time I've played it live, I mess up that fill, which is upsetting. Actually, I'm going to try to play that just from memory now, just to satisfy my own kind of compulsion about it. That's what it is. I'm not gonna blame it on the fact that cymbal's not there, but I will say I think I'm a little bit like a baseball player, in the sense that A, I'm not really an athlete, and B, I think I get in my head superstitiously about little things like this, which is not a good habit for a musician, because my time needs to be good always. But that's also why, if you're watching this, you're on the journey with me to try to become better at things. So that's my justification, at least, is I'm improving slowly, but I'm getting there. And hey, I pretty much nailed 2 songs today that were both pretty long and pretty complex. Maybe 3. I can't even remember now. I actually did pretty good at the DragonForce too, even though I kind of picked that at random. I was just like, hey, that'd be fun to play, and I think it's in my search history. It's like DragonForce drumless track or something. So I was like, yeah, that might be fun. So yeah, got a couple good takes. Still have to work on Blackened, but we'll get there. And yeah, what else? Appreciate you for joining. New Blind Guardian's good. New Blind Guardian is, as always, really great. I would encourage you to just spend a week just melting into those songs and living in the world of that album, because it's worth it. Anything Blind Guardian does is worth it to try to absorb yourself into their world. I wanted to watch something with you all today. I wanted to watch a video from Matt Garska, the legendary drummer, but we didn't get to it. And I've been going for hours and hours and hours. This has been really long. So that's going to have to wait for next time. So that'll be a fun one. That'll kind of tie back into the discussion we've been having, the sort of long-form discussion we've been having here about Instagram. I need to order it. Assuming you mean the Blind Guardian album, order it. It's great. It's great. It's great. It's fun. I would say about half of the album feels like an old school Blind Guardian album, and then the tracks that don't feel like an old school Blind Guardian album feel like a like some of the most memorable parts of like slower Blind Guardian of the 21st century. You know, stuff like Road of No Release and stuff like that. Some of the songs have that kind of vibe to them. And the production's way better. Holy crap. We like started out this stream on like the first episode talking about how shitty the production sounds, and I would say it's like 85% fixed on this album. It sounds so much better than I was expecting it to. I was expecting to have to sit there with my listening rig messing with knobs and buttons for hours to try to make this album sound passably good. And no, it sounds awesome. I mean, it's not as good as the albums used to be, but it's such an improvement over Beyond the Red Mirror, which you can see I'm repping today. But it sounds better. The production is the majority of the issues are at least reduced. You know, so yeah, immensely happy with that. I'm bad at critiquing the band, so maybe no one else will like it. I think it's awesome. Yeah, and again, I'm trying to cultivate that as a quality, just like which is a very kind of boomer-like quality, which is you just sort of uncritically enjoy everything. I'm trying to zen out and just enjoy everything. Yeah, so I'll continue to work on some of the old stuff for next time, but then I think we've been at some of these songs for at least two episodes now, so I think add a couple more things to the roster, put a couple more items on the docket for us to maybe watch or listen to or something like that and talk about. And yeah, it'll be fun. Thanks for joining. I am sweaty and I am starving. I have been streaming for so much freaking longer than I thought I would. But yeah, thanks for indulging me. I still have so much fun with these. Yeah, and I'm happy to do them. So cool. Cool! Exclamation point. Yeah. All right. Well, I will see you all soon. Have a good one. And auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye. I'm often to reading a Metal Hammer. Okay. As the advertisement says, I'm off for 12x maximum fun time. Okay, goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye.